to your Daily 5 for Tuesday, January 9th, 2024. I was listening to the Macbreak Weekly from last week, so a week ago today, because it comes out on Tuesdays, and there was discussion over the almost certainty that there is going to be some new version of the iPad hardware this year. There was not anything last year, and what a lot of people think, and it seems pretty likely, is that there's going to be a new iPad this year that will likely have several substantial upgrades. And in the course of that discussion, the idea came up of, well, what if Apple were to implement something, because iPads are such powerful devices now, even though, and they point this out in that episode, and I criticized this idea when it first came out, that iPads are not just another computer. I don't know why Apple, well, whatever, we're not going to get into that. In any event, what they were saying was whether or not it is a computer or not, and I don't even know what that even means anymore. Any device with substantial computing power is a computer, but that the thing that holds it back is that it still has limitations when compared to using a device that runs macOS. Because for those who aren't aware, and I think most people already know this, at least on the edges, basically the iPhone, the iPad, and the full-size Mac computer, laptops or desktops, run three different operating systems: iOS on the phone, iPadOS on the iPads, and macOS on the computer, the big computers, or the mainline computers, whatever you want to call them. Computers that have a keyboard and a screen, and it's all separate. It's not a touch screen all in one device. And there are things that just do not work as well on the iPad because of the way that the iPadOS runs. Files are often brought up. The lack of I/O ports is often brought up. The lack of sideloading is often brought up. And interestingly, in the discussion that the hosts were having, they brought up this idea that Apple might release, or it wouldn't necessarily be completely crazy to think that they might put some version of a container version of macOS on an iPad, either an app or a way to reboot the machine and run macOS. That would actually be, for many people, the thing that would stop them from having to use a laptop or another machine on top of an iPad. They could do everything in one. And there were several arguments why it's very, very unlikely. But the one that seemed the craziest to me is that Apple would have to prevent sideloading on that version of macOS, that you would not be able to sideload apps. Because I don't like now everything's being aimed at creators. I hear creator as it's positioned for creator. This is a nonsense term, another nonsense term that we have to make up to generate interest or something around a term and a type of person that we already knew what they were. What is a creator? What are we defining that as now? Oh, you mean the people who use computers to create things? I think they existed before the term creator, but I feel like that is now being almost, that's the new influencer or hipster or whatever stupid term. But I'm not going to do any more on that because that's a whole separate five on its own. In any event, let's say it is creator focused. Now, technically, I would fall into that category, even though I don't describe myself as a creator. But certainly, based on the output that I use the computing devices I have for, I create images in Photoshop all the time. I do video editing, even if it's very lightweight compared to others. And I've been producing a podcast, so audio engineering and editing, for quite a while now. I'm not saying I do it well, but I am doing it, which you could apply to almost any creator, honestly, depending on who they are. So one of the things that I value macOS for is because there are aspects of different programs I use that are not in the App Store. If they were to put a version of macOS on the iPad and not allow for sideloading, I don't know how big a group of people that will really apply to. Certainly, it will be great for anybody who is wholly invested in the macOS, or the Apple ecosystem. And maybe that's all they would care about. But it's not going to grow much past that, because I think most people probably do at least some amount of sideloading, or at least non-App Store app installs with their Mac, meaning the Mac OS computing device. And so if the version of it that ran on iPad couldn't run anything that existed outside the App Store, not only would it limit what you could do, but it would also probably impact how a lot of people actually use their tools to create, how they are creators. So I don't know why they would ever do that. I think if they were going to launch some kind of containerized macOS or some kind of macOS Lite on iPad, I think that banning sideloading from it or preventing that basically prevents anybody from caring about it. So it makes it somewhat useless. But I know there's a lot of people with different computing platforms and ways of working out there who listen to the show. So I'd be curious, if you have an iPad and if they released a macOS on it that could not sideload apps, would that be something you would use? Let me know later.